Hi, I'm Kevin Freeman. It's April 16th, 2023. Today I am by myself, heading off into the woods without my sidekick and good friend Ron Nowell. Ron is not feeling very well, so we're going to wait for him to recover and he can join us next time. This won't be a long walk. It's only about 0.36 miles, and we can follow a new skidder road. So if you're wondering where I am going to Cemetery Lot 110 off Logging Road in Cape Neddick, Maine. It is the old Freeman Cemetery, which was part of the Freeman Farm, which is currently owned by John Bridges on Logging Road. This piece of property was owned by Nathaniel Freeman. I think it was an early grant of about 200 acres, and subsequently it has been owned by the Warner family for, I think, since 1960, 1950 maybe. This is the landing place for a recent logging operation. And here you can see Logging Road right in front of us. I'm going to provide a map so you can see how I walked in to access the cemetery. If you are planning on visiting this cemetery, I do recommend asking the landowner for permission. There is also a right-of-way to this cemetery in an old deed for the property that can be found at the York County Registry of Deeds in Alfred. For purposes of clarification, the farm was split up when the Warner family sold it. They broke the farmhouse off, which is where John Bridges resides currently, and they kept the bulk of the land behind the farmhouse, which includes the cemetery. So it looks like there is a bridge here, but a Tsuga canadensis, eastern hemlock, that has been deprived of life by the woolly adelgid, has obstructed passageway across the bridge. So, I think I will try to jump across this little stream right over here. Wish me luck. Somebody has a nice little tree stand out here. What a nice place to sit for an afternoon. So here we are. This is plot 110, Freeman Cemetery, off Logging Road. You can find this map on the Town of York's website, yorkmaine.org. And this red arrow indicates our current location. So this cemetery went with the Freeman Farm, which as a youngster I grew up calling Bridges Farm, because John Bridges and his family lived there and owned the place. And prior to that, the Warner family lived there. And so I grew up in the neighborhood of the Bridges, the Warners, the Dunnells. Let's see who else was on Logging Road. The Junkins, Traftons, Fernals, Dufresnes, Bracey, Liston. I probably missed somebody. Chases, Millers, Roberges, and of course I was the first house on the left. My grandmother was even before my house. She lived in a trailer at the entrance to the Freeman Farm, which was the Goodwin Farm, which is not to be confused with this farm. By all indications, the stones, with the exception of one, have been removed, obviously vandalized, and it's a shame. So there is one remaining headstone. and that is of Nathaniel Freeman, who was probably the first owner of this property, and the headstone is kind of hidden. It's a slate stone, and you can see it was grown into that large pine tree, and when that pine tree, if it had the opportunity to tumble over, I think it would have taken at least the headstone and perhaps the grave, and if there's a casket in there, and what remains there are with it. So I'm glad they came in and they cut these trees off. As much as I don't like cutting trees, hopefully it's helped to preserve the cemetery. So you can see over here, there are some foundations for other headstones, but there are no headstones. So today I decided to bring some of my favorite flowers out and scatter the seeds around and see what happens. First, the lupin. At the end of the summer of 2022, the people that owned this property had it logged, and at that time I asked the owner of the logging company if it would be possible to cut the trees out of the cemetery. He did ask the landowner, and they cut the trees out, and that's why you see these stumps. These foxglove are tiny, tiny little seeds. I can't really tell with certainty, but I believe there is a willow and an urn motif on the top. And below the inscription says, "In memory of Deacon Nathaniel Freeman, who died April 28th, 1834, aged 92 years old." Someday I might come out with some cleaner and just kind of gently persuade that image to appear. But I can sort of see a leaf pattern right here, which makes me think it's a willow. I've been coming out to this cemetery for years. I grew up about half a mile from here, maybe a little more, a little less. And I spent a lot of time in my childhood hunting out here with the neighborhood kids. I loved to come out and hunt, and we'd often pass by the cemetery, and I really didn't give it much thought. And I do recall when there were more headstones out here, but I can't really say if it was one or two. But we do have a record by a lay historian that I'd like to share with you. So what I have here is the Keniston Saga, which is a family history written by Rachel Keniston. And the Freeman family was part of her family, and she has done quite an extensive genealogy of all of the persons that lived at the Freeman farm on Logging Road, including Deacon Nathaniel and his wife. So let's just start at the beginning here. This is page 1, and we can see that Deacon Nathaniel Freeman was born in 1742, and he was married to Hannah Foster of Cape Neddick. So if we take a look at Hannah Foster, she was descended from Governor Bradstreet of Massachusetts as follows. Governor Simon Bradstreet married Anna Dudley. John Bradstreet, son of Governor Bradstreet, married Sarah Perkins. Dorothy Bradstreet, daughter, married Samuel Clark. Mary Clark, his daughter, married William Foster. Hannah Foster, daughter of William, married Deacon Nathaniel Freeman. And what I think might be the most beneficial part of Rachel's paper is that her mother recorded the names from the cemetery when she visited there in 1930. Rachel goes on to say that her mother visited the cemetery again in 1930, actually September 21st, 1930, and that she went there with her nephew and brother, and they visited the old farm, and they had noticed some of the stones had been removed. And she writes, "To my knowledge, the ones that repose there, great-grandfather and great-grandmother at left of entrance, Uncle Nat and Aunt Susan back in the lot." On another card, Elizabeth wrote the following: great-grandfather, great-grandmother, grandfather Edward, grandmother Mahitable, Hannah F., Martha C. F., Edward Going F., Lowell Mason F., Nathaniel F., Mary M. F. She added, "There may have been others laid there. Uncle Eben and Uncle Jerry were buried in York, Maine. My father Asa was buried in Dorchester, Massachusetts." Without Rachel Keniston's family history, I would never have known that there were more than 10 people buried in that cemetery. I would have just assumed that there were several, and I would not have known their names, and they would have been anonymous. John Bridges allowed me to take a copy of this photograph that hangs in his house. On the back, it is dated 1865. I think it is reasonable to conclude that at least a few of these people in the photograph are those buried out in the cemetery. So I've often wondered why somebody would take the headstones and why would they carry them out of here? For what reason would that be, other than just being malicious? And it's really sad that they did do that. Thought I'd do a little tribute to the Freeman family while I'm out here. This was my dad's favorite song, and I like to think maybe it was passed down through his family as their favorite song too. So there we have it. Another trip into the woods. A trip without my friend Ron, who I do miss, and I hope he is getting better every day. Thanks for coming along. Take care.